their places, and also would invite all of our speakers to come forward for the panel discussion. We'll just have you take one of the properly distanced seats. Yes, we met in 1995 at the Zase Symposia in St. Catharines. I think it was the first time I ran in, but that was probably the last time I saw you. So I was serving in Saskatchewan at the time. So, and you were a speaker, or yeah, I think I met you there. Oh, and then yeah. Yes. All right, we have about, we've given an hour almost, or 50 minutes for questions. So if you would direct your question either to the speaker for which it's intended, or if it's to the panel in general, please do so from the microphone. Pastor Rickbaugh.
Adam, we talked about the Magdeburg Confession. So you went at it a little different than the lesser magistrate's principle of that. But you went on it in creational order, basically, right? That it's out of order, so we have a right to resist the out of order. You want to say anything? Some of us are familiar with the Magdeburg.
Yeah. So the Magdeburg Confession you can get in English easily now. It's pretty cheap on Amazon. And it is a Lutheran confession, it's not in the Lutheran confessions, you guys know that, from, I think it's 1555. And the situation was that the empire, the Holy Roman Empire, was about to crush one of the last remaining Lutheran territories, the city of Magdeburg. And before the siege actually began, when they sort of could see what was coming militarily, they wrote this confession. The very front end of it sounds a lot like the Small Call articles. Fairly standard stuff. Most of it is about the relationship between church and state. And what they have in there is a doctrine that would come to be called the doctrine of lesser magistrates, when it was then that idea was developed by first French Protestants, the Huguenots, in their resistance to being crushed by the Catholic monarch of France. And then through reading them, John Adams among our framers. So that doctrine says that different levels of government have different responsibilities. So, for example, and this goes all the way down to one's own person, the example that the confession gives is that if a woman and her daughters are being sold into prostitution by the husband, they have the right to resist him because it's contrary to their own given, I would, in terms of my presentation, created order of protecting their own life and body from dishonor, right, and violence. So they say, okay, well, this applies, so the city of Magdeburg has the responsibility to protect its own citizens, both physically from the emperor's armies and also spiritually. This is the Reformation understanding of government as a nursing mother to religion. That is, that it should promote and conserve true religion, right? That's kind of something to discuss another time, I suppose. But in view of that, Magdeburg is not trying to force the emperor to become Lutheran, but they will defend the existence of Lutheranism in Magdeburg. And they have 4 different stages of resistance, the last of which is actual opposition. They say there's a lot of stuff that you should bear with even when it's actively tyrannical, but finally there is a time when you must resist. So I would pick that up and read it if you're interested. Go ahead, yeah.
And if you do resist, it's always peacefully through the system that's there.
Yeah, well, yeah. And
not like what's happened here in Minneapolis.
Yeah. So it's not. So the doctrine of lesser magistrates says that the created orders are the ways that also resistance to tyranny should flow. Right. So if someone's going to invade my home, I, as the father, need to resist that invasion. That would be kind of a simple family example, but they apply it also to government.
Thank you to all the presenters for your time and your work. A question that came to mind was prompted by your presentation, Pastor Strawn, and I'd be happy to hear what any of you have to say about it. I was thinking about the effectiveness of the vocables coming through the speakers or through the TV or through the internet, and there's really, the question of validity or effectiveness is maybe not the main question, but there is a question in my mind about how that experience, how those technologies shape the way we receive the message. So one simple example would be TV and the internet and mass media have shaped our culture to a culture of consumption. And I wonder if you can comment on the way that broadcasting God's word over those media makes us mere consumers of God's word as opposed to being shaped by it, informed by it, and being called to repentance and faith.
That's a great question, but I don't know if you've noticed that your grandkids look at the television in one way and your kids look at it in another way. Your uncle looks at it in another way. I already have 8 grandkids, and I've got 2 on the way, and 6 kids in their 20s. And it's amazing to see how they look at what they're seeing on the screen and comprehending it in a completely different way than what I am and what they believe about it. The person that pushed me into simulcasting or in live streaming was a woman in her 30s. And she and her family have no issues at all with the church service being online and participating in that service online as if they are at the service. Older people didn't even have computers to watch. And they were purchased computers and laptops, and they looked at it as this new novel thing. And I had someone say to me, "Wow, you're on television now. How much did you have to pay to get on and to broadcast your services?" Completely clueless as to how it all works. And so I would say there's a difference in generations as to how the message is received. I think the young people receive the message as if I were just speaking to them. You get a text. If you get a text while I'm speaking to you, do you grab the text or do you speak to me? Which one gets more important? Which one is more important to you? The text you receive or the communication between you and me? I've told this story before, but I was up at Madden's and a pastor sees me from across the narthex. "Oh, Paul, I got to see you, Paul. Don't leave before and he's yelling across the whole hall. "I got to see you. I'm coming over to see you right now." And right before he gets to me, I'm thinking, wow, this is really important. His phone rings. He pulls it out and he says, "Oh, I got to take this." And he walks away. And I'm like, okay, I'm in your presence. I am here. Right here, 3D. Your phone took precedence over me, the information that was coming through there, the message that was coming through there. So I'm thinking for the younger people, it doesn't matter whether they're in my presence or not. And maybe we need to see the church blow the building up in our minds and see the communication on Sunday morning as just simply occurring with whoever wants to take part in that communication, live streaming, and say, this is our entire congregation here, the people who are taking part. in the congregation. Someone said to me, well, can you do at-home communion? And I don't, we don't do it, of course. But is it possible to do it? Well, you can't control who gets it and who doesn't. Oh, you can't? What about a Zoom meeting that people have to sign up for? What about controlling who has access to our stream? There's all sorts of ways to do something in this way. But the younger generation is certainly not looking at this, I don't think, as consuming a product. I think they're seeing it as participatory communication. And that being the case, I think we need to be more open and get over it. Like this young lady said to me a number of times, Pastor, you just need to get over yourself. Because I didn't want to be live streamed, and I didn't want to be on YouTube, and I didn't want to take part in any of that world. That's my kids' world. But now I'm there. And now people are hearing it, and they're taking part in it, and we reach more people every Sunday morning with what we do than we ever have before. Now, you talked about blessing. It's a horrible thing that happens, but a blessing comes from it. Is it then a horrible thing or really a blessing? To be able to get into people's houses, many of whom are just agoraphobics. They don't want to go out in public anyway before COVID ever hit. They don't want to come to a church and have somebody say, "Hi, my name is so-and-so.
If I could kindly
Peace."
ask you to
They don't
take
want any
your
of that.
places.
But they will listen on a Sunday morning and tune in, and they do.
Also would invite
Okay.
all of
I know
our
I didn't completely
speakers
answer
to
your
come
question. Maybe we can
forward
talk
for
later about it.
the
But
panel
I think
discussion.
the essence is there, and that is, how are people seeing it today? And I don't think they're seeing it as a product. I see they're just seeing it like the text coming through their phone.
Don't go away. Paul, don't go away.
We'll just have you take one of the properly distanced seats.
I concede from my generational perspective, I concede what you have presented, but I'm going to ask a rhetorical question that you may or may not want to respond to based upon another Bible verse that I'll grab out of the scriptures, Hebrews, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. Is there not some increased value with interpersonal relationship? And ask a value judgment, is it good or better that it should be prioritized, that cell phone should take preference over your personal contact? Jesus laid hands on people.
Yes, we
Right.
met in
And I think this is one of those issues we had
at the
seminary way back when,
in St. Catharines.
where
I
in
think was the
pastoral
first time
practice
I
they
ran
asked the
into
question,
that.
you're
That was
talking to
probably the
somebody
last
about
time
some
I saw
important
you,
matter,
so.
the phone rings,
I
do you
was
take the
serving in
phone call or you keep
Saskatchewan
talking to the
at the
person?
time, so.
And the answer,
And
of
you
course,
were
is you
a
keep
speaker,
talking to the
or,
person,
yeah,
you
I
ignore
think
the
I
phone.
met you there.
We haven't come to a conclusion yet societally as to what is more important when we have a cell phone and we're talking to someone face to face. As a society, we have not decided which is more important. We all have had situations
All
where
right,
we're
we
talking to
have
somebody
about,
and somebody calls and we say, oh,
Well, we've
and we
given
make
an
the judgment
hour almost,
immediately.
or 50 minutes
This is more
for
important
questions.
than talking to you.
So if you would
And we say, I
direct
have
your
to take
question
this,
either
and that's
to the
become
speaker
accepted,
for
right?
which it's intended,
Okay, you have
or
to take
if it's
it
to
and
the
you
panel
walk
in
away,
general,
whether or not you
please do
continue
so from the
that
microphone,
face-to-face
Pastor
communication.
Ritwell.
Now, it could be that you're really good and you say, no, I'm shutting off my phone, I'm not listening to my phone buzzes, I'll ignore it, I'm talking to you, you're right in front of me, I'll take it.
So
And I would suggest that's
you
the
went
right
at
way
it
to
a
go
little
about
different
it.
than
I
the
would suggest, and that's what I try to always do.
Principle of
I
that.
leave my phone in my office during church,
but
so whoever's
you went
talking
on
to me,
it
I just sit
in
and talk with them.
creational order,
We talk face to face.
basically, right? That
And I
it's
think we
out of
do need to
order, so
prioritize,
we
certainly, to
have a
have face to
right
face
to
and
resist
communal
the
worship,
out of
certainly.
order.
But as a
You
pastor,
wanna
I have to deal
say
with the
anything?
people who are frightened silly
Some of us
to come
are
out in
familiar with
public
that.
Yeah.
and frightened silly
So the
to come to
Magdeburg
church,
Confession,
although
you
they
can
still
get in
want to hear the
English,
gospel of Jesus Christ.
Easily
And
now.
so I am willing out of love
Pretty cheap on Amazon.
to serve them.
And it is
as
a
their
Lutheran
minister
confession,
of the
it's in
gospel.
the Lutheran
And I
confessions.
hope that
You
over
guys know
time,
that.
as we get
From,
through this,
I think it's
they will come
1555,
back,
and the
and we might even
situation
have
was
more
that the
people
empire,
who have been
the
reached
Holy Roman Empire,
by
was
our
about to
streaming
crush one of the
services,
last
who
remaining
will then come
Lutheran
and meet us for the
territories, the
first
city
time.
of Magdeburg.
So I'm doing both
And
things.
Before
at
the
same
siege
time. But
actually began,
yes,
when
I'd
they
like to
sort of could see what
prioritize,
was
but I
coming
can't leave
militarily,
behind the people
they
who
wrote this confession.
just out of fear
The very
can't-
front end of it
can't
sounds
bring
a lot like
themselves
the
to
small
walk through our
articles. fairly
Don't sit
standard
down.
stuff. Most of it is about the
Don't sit
relationship
down.
between church and state. And what they have in there is a doctrine
I
that
understand
would
the
come to be called the
courtesy
doctrine
of
of
cell
lesser
phone.
magistrates,
That's great.
when it was then
I understand
that
the electronic
idea
communications we have today
was
and
developed
the
by
possibilities we have to spread
first
the word of God.
French
That's
Protestants, the
fantastic.
Huguenots, and their
I utilize
resistance
them.
to being crushed by the Catholic
Absolutely.
monarch of France.
However,
And then through reading
Follow up a
them,
little bit on what Pastor Getz may
actually
have said.
John
there is
Adams
that
among
very,
our
to me, extreme
framers.
importance
So
of physical gathering together.
that doctrine says that
Is
different
there that
levels of
possibility
government have different
I've seen
responsibilities.
indicated in conversation.
So, for example,
wonder if it
and
falls
this goes all the way down to one's own person,
works
the
possibility
example that the confession gives is that if
That
a woman and
I
her
can remain
daughters
home,
are being
check the
sold
box,
into
and
prostitution
now I
by the
have caught my
husband,
anonymity,
they have the right to resist
therefore
him because it's
absolve myself
contrary
of
to
any
their own
responsibility.
given, I would, in terms of my presentation,
Is
created
that there?
order of
Right.
protecting
And so
their
you're
own life
saying, I'm
and
sorry, I was
body
having a
from
hard time hearing
dishonor,
everything
right,
you were saying.
and violence.
That you're
So
saying ultimately we don't have a check and
they
balance
say,
if people
okay,
are
well, this
communicating.
applies.
Okay.
So the city of Magdeburg has
an
a
interesting thing-
responsibility to protect its own citizens.
I thought of, well, at least it was
both
to me, so I'll share it
physically
with you.
from the
And
emperor's
you can judge
armies and
yourself.
also spiritually. This is
Why
the
doesn't
Reformation
Paul
understanding
go
of
to every
government as
congregation
a
and deliver his
nursing
messages
mother to
personally?
religion. That is, that it should
Why does he write
promote and
letters to
conserve
them
true religion, right? That's kind
and
of
have those letters
something to
sent
discuss another time,
and
I
then have
suppose.
those
But
letters read? And
in view
Paul
of
even
that,
talks about,
Magdeburg is
which
not
one of the
trying to
letters is
force
it where he
the
talks
emperor
about,
to become
I'm with
Lutheran,
you
but they will defend the
spiritually,
existence
even
of
though,
Lutheranism.
right now, even
in
though I'm not with
Magdeburg.
you physically.
And they have four
The whole
different
idea of
stages of
Scripture
resistance,
itself,
the last of which is actual
Of the Word of God
opposition.
going out apart
They say there's a
from the
lot of
speaker.
stuff that you should bear with, even when
The
it's actively
Gospels, the
tyrannical.
epistles.
But finally, there is a time when you
We
must
never
resist.
met those
So I would
speakers.
pick that up and read
We
it
never
if
encountered
you're
them face
interested.
to face.
Go ahead. Yeah.
And yet on a Sunday
And
morning,
if
we
you do
read
it's
the
always
words from them.
peacefully with the system
Now,
that's
that should
there.
help
Yeah, well,
inform
yeah,
us as to
what's
using
happened
electronic
here
communication.
in
Is it the
Yeah,
best
yeah,
thing?
so
Should
it's
we
not,
have people
it's
coming
not-
to our
yeah, so the
churches
doctrine of lesser
and
magistrate
taking
says
part?
that the
Yes.
created
Should we
orders are the
encourage them to
ways
do
that
that? Yes.
also
Should it be
resistance to
prioritized?
tyranny
Yes.
should flow.
But is using electronic
Right.
media,
So
especially
if,
at this
someone's
time,
gonna invade
something
my home,
that we
I,
should
as
run
the
away
father,
from? No.
need to
Do we have to
resist
learn
that
how to use it?
invasion.
Yes. Do we have to
would be
figure
kind
out
of
checks
a
and balances?
simple
Yes.
family
Like
example,
everything else.
But they apply it also to government.
But we have to see that the Word
Thank
of
you to all
God
the
can work
presenters for
through it
your time
and
and your
does
work.
work
A
through
question
it,
that came to
to
mind
reach
was prompted
people who
by your
otherwise
presentation,
wouldn't
Pastor
hear it.
Strawn, and I'd be happy to hear
And then
what
we
any of you
encourage
have
them to
say
take
about it. I was
part,
thinking
come and
about
take part in the actual communal
the effectiveness
aspect
of the
the church.
vocables coming through the speakers or through the TV or through the
I'll
internet.
let
And there's
Pastor
really,
Strawn sit down
the
for a
question
moment.
of validity or effectiveness is
I'll
maybe not the
give
main
this
question,
to
but there is
either
a
of the
question
other
in my mind about
doctors,
how that experience,
someone mentioned
how those technologies
divided
shape
we
the way we
are
receive the message. So
now
one
because
simple
of what
example
we're
would be,
facing, more so than
TV and the
I
internet
think ever
and
before.
mass
Like,
media have
in
shaped
a
our culture to a
confessional
culture of consumption.
Lutheran church,
And I wonder if you
we
could
had one
comment on
kind
the
of
way that
service.
broadcasting,
for many of us, we only have one
broadcasting God's word
service, and
over
now
those media
I would
makes
say,
us
like, I have
mere
5
consumers
congregations.
of
I
God's word
have
as
my
opposed to
masked
being shaped by it,
congregation at
informed
8
by it,
that
and being
doesn't
called to
sing.
repentance and
I have
faith.
my 9 o'clock non-maskers who sing. We have it broadcast into the parking lot. We have people who come into the parking lot and just
That's a great
listen
question,
on
but,
FM. We stream. And then I have a
I don't know if
small
you've
Monday
noticed
night
that your
where
grandkids
people
look at the
can spread
television
out.
in one way and your kids look
What's
at
our
it in another
hope
way.
for?
Your uncle looks at it in
We've
another way.
never faced this.
I already have 8 grandkids.
Do we have a hope?
And I've got 2 on the way.
Short of the
and 6
resurrection
kids.
for
in their
unifying
20s.
again, or what are your
And,
thoughts on that?
It's amazing to see how
I think
they
it's
look
one
at
of the
what they're
things
seeing on
people
the
are
screen
concerned about,
and
that
comprehending it
even
in a
when this
completely
is
different way
over,
than what I am
it's not going to be over for a
and
lot
what
of
they
people
believe about
that
it.
they might. So just
The person that pushed me
pastoral
into
thoughts, scriptural
simulcasting
thoughts on
or
that?
in live streaming was a woman in her 30s. And she and her family have
Before
no
we had COVID,
issues at all with
we had
the church
8
service being
o'clock
online
church
and participating
10:30
in that
church.
service online
It's
as
like
if they
serving
are
2
at the
congregations
service.
in a way. You got the 8 o'clock
Older
people,
people
you got
look
the
at,
10:30 people,
didn't even
and it
have
always
computers
seemed
to
to
watch.
me to be a
And they
challenge
were
to try
purchased
to keep them
computers and
together as one
laptops, and
congregation.
they looked at it as this new novel
Then
thing.
we got the idea
and
we
I
should have a
had
Monday
someone
night
say to me,
service
Wow. You're on
vacationers,
television now.
for
How
people
much
that go
did
up
you have
north
to
for
pay
the
to get
weekend,
on
come
and to
back, they work
broadcast
on
your
Monday, they come to
services?
church on Monday night.
Completely
And so now we have the 8 o'clock to 10:30 and the
clueless
Monday
as to
people
how it
that
all
keep on
works.
fragmenting.
And so I would
And
say
now
there's
how
a
do you
difference
keep
in
them all together?
generations as to how the message is
And,
received. Some of our, I think the young
It
people
seems to me we
receive
have a
the message
couple
as
of
if I were
built-in
just speaking to them.
advantages.
And
one
you get
is
a
the order of
text.
service.
Do you? And if you get a text while
If we're all doing
I'm
the same
speaking
order
to
of
you,
service,
you grab
even
the
if we're
text or
doing
do
it
you
at 3
speak to
different
me?
times,
Which one gets more
that gives us
important?
something
Which
that
one
we
is
have
more
in
important to
common.
you? The text you receive, or
There was
the
a time
communication between you and
when
me?
if you went on vacation,
I've told the story
and we're
before,
looking
but
for
I
a church to
was up
visit
at
on a
Madden's,
Sunday,
and
you'd
a
look at the
pastor
hymnal.
sees me from across the.
If it was the
whatever,
same
narthex.
hymnal you had at home,
Oh, Paul, I
okay,
got to
I'll
see what
feel at home
I
here.
got to see you, Paul. Don't leave
I realize
before
it's not quite
and
like it
he's-
used
and
to
he's
be,
yelling
but I remember
across
those days.
The whole hall. I got to see you. I'm coming over to see
and the
you
other
right
thing
now,
is,
right before
give
he
them the
gets
same
to me.
sermon.
I'm thinking, wow, this is really important.
So I preach the same sermon
phone
at 8,
rings.
same sermon at 10:30,
Pulls it
same
out and he
sermon on
says,
Monday,
"Oh, I got to take this."
and now they all get the same sermon.
and he walks
They
away.
can talk to each other about the sermon.
And I'm like, okay, I'm in
So
your
we have
presence.
things like this that we can do to
I am here.
unify them.
Right here, 3D.
And what we're really using to do
Your
that
phone took
then is the
precedence
gospel.
over me, the information that was coming through
The
there,
order of
message that was
service
coming through
really
there.
is the
So I'm
gospel.
thinking for the younger people, it doesn't
And
matter
I
whether
trust
they're in my
that at least
presence
most
or
of the
not.
time the sermon
and
is the
maybe we
gospel
need
too.
to see the church
But at least,
blow the building up in our
As
minds.
a friend of mine used to say that
and
the
see the
order of service is
communication
there
on
to
Sunday
protect you
morning
from your
as just
pastor.
simply occurring.
At least you know
with
you'll get it
whoever
out of the
wants to
liturgy,
take
even
part
if you
in
don't
that
have a good sermon
communication,
necessarily that particular Sunday.
live streaming,
But,
and say this is our entire congregation.
I
Here
think
the
too
people who are
about,
taking part in the congregation.
We had a discussion.
Someone said to me, "Well, can you do at-home
how
communion?"
do we
And I
design
don't-
our website?
you know, we don't do it, of course.
And what is our
But
website
is it
for?
possible to do it? Well, you can't control
Two
who
basic
gets
answers
and who
are
doesn't.
either it's for
Oh, you
visitors,
can't?
it's
What
for
about a Zoom meeting that
outsiders,
people have
so
to
that
sign
they
up
can
for?
check us out before
What
they
about
come.
controlling who has access to our stream?
And so you can have things on
There's
there.
all sorts of ways
what's
to do something
What's
in
expected
this
in the way
way.
of dress?
But the younger generation
where do you
is certainly
park?
not looking at this.
And what's going
I
to
don't
happen when
think,
you
as
come in?
consuming
And how
a
does the
product.
service work? I mean,
I
if they
think
don't
they're
know
seeing it
anything,
as
you can give them a little bit of an
participatory
introduction.
communication.
It'll make it easier
And,
to visit for the first time.
That being the case, I think
And
we
if
need to
you've
be more
browsed
open
church websites,
and get
you've
over
probably
it.
seen a few like that.
this young lady said to me.
Then there's other church
a
websites
number of
that are
times,
for the
Pastor,
people
you
that
just
are
need to
already
get over
members.
yourself.
And now here's where you can
Because
go to
I didn't
look
want
at
to
the
be
calendar and find out
on-
what time
I
is
didn't
that
want to
meeting.
be live streamed, and I didn't want to be on YouTube, and I didn't want
And
to take
so
part in any
how
of that
you
world.
use the website
That's my
depends
kids' world.
on who you're talking to,
But
who
now
you're
I'm there.
aiming at, who you're trying to
And
reach.
now people are hearing it, and they're taking
And
part
I'm
in
not
it, and we
here
reach more
to
people every Sunday morning.
advocate for one
with
over
what
the
we do
other.
than
I'm
we
just
ever
saying
have
we can be
before.
intentional about these kind of things.
Now,
And these are really conversations
talk
we were
about,
already having
blessing,
before
March.
March.
It's a horrible thing that happens.
And in
but
a way, it
blessing
hasn't
comes from
changed.
it. Is it then
We
a horrible
still
thing
have
or really
people
a blessing?
meeting at different times.
To
We
be
have
able to
people
get
meeting
into
with
people's
different,
houses, many of whom are just
should we say,
agoraphobics.
preferences,
They don't want to go out in
whether
public
it's
anyway before
musical
COVID ever
styles
hit.
or
They
whether
don't want
it's
to come to a
time of
church and
day.
have somebody say, "Hi,
And that's
my
the
name is
question. You have a
so-and-so.
Monday night
Welcome
service.
to Prince
Is
of
that
Peace."
because they like the
They
music
don't
there
want any
better,
of
or is
that.
that because they like that time
They
better?
will listen on a Sunday
Don't know
morning and tune in,
necessarily.
and they do.
So
Okay.
I do think
I know
we
I
have
didn't
these
completely answer your
two
question. Maybe we can talk later
tools,
about it.
or
But
these
I think
two
the essence
advantages
is
that
there,
we can
and that is how are people seeing it
maybe
today?
more
And I don't
consciously
think
try
they're
to
seeing
use.
it
We
as
use the same
a
order of
product. I
service.
see that
We give them
they're
the
just
same
seeing it like
sermon
the
and
text
try
coming through
to
your phone.
unify people by means of the word.
Don't go away.
Thank you.
Paul, don't go away.
Pastor
I
Ryan.
concede from
So
my
my question
generational
is for Dr.
perspective,
Coons.
I concede what you have
Thank
presented.
you for the words of hope
but
that you
I'm going
expressed
to
at
ask
the
a rhetorical
conclusion of
question
your
that you may or may not
presentation, the
want to
assurance that
respond
we
to,
have
based upon
in
another
regard to
Bible verse
being
that I'll grab
subordinate
out of the
to our
scriptures,
government.
not
There was
forsaking
another
the
time in our
not
nation's
forsaking the
history when
assembling
our
of
nation was
ourselves
awfully
together.
divided.
Is there
and
not
that was at the time
some
of the Revolutionary War,
increased value
where there were a
with
number of
interpersonal
people,
relationship
number
and
of citizens
ask a
who thought
value
we should
judgment?
be
Is
subordinate
it
to
good
King
or
George,
better
and
that
there were
it
those who
should be
thought that we should
prioritized,
rebel
that
and
cell phone
revolt.
should take
So in your
preference
opinion,
over your personal
were those who
contact.
thought
Jesus
that
laid
the
hands on
revolt was
people.
necessary
Right.
and justified?
And I
in
think
not
this is
being
one of those
supported,
issues we had at the
subordinate
seminary
to
way back
King
when.
George?
Yeah,
where in
I do
pastoral
think they were
practice they ask the
justified
question, you're
because
talking to
their
somebody
argument is
about
that
some
the
important matter, the phone rings, do
Constitution
you take
of
the phone call or you
English
keep talking to the
government
person?
is not
And
actually.
the answer, of course, is you
and I
keep
think
talking to the person, you ignore the phone.
This is pretty important, and it's an issue that
we haven't
Lutherans
come
have always
to a
had in
conclusion
America,
yet
and
societally
some of
as
it
to
is
what is more
justified that
important
we have trouble
when
understanding how
we
to
have a cell
operate
phone and
within
we're
this
talking to
governmental
someone
system
face to
because
face.
whereas
As a
Lutherans
society,
come
we have
from
not
fairly
decided
strictly
which is more
monarchical
important. We
situations
all have had
in Europe,
situations where we're talking to
Anglo-Saxon
somebody
government
and somebody
has
calls and we say, oh,
never
and we make the
been
judgment immediately.
straightforwardly an issue of the guy
This
at
is
the
more
top
important
issues
than
commands.
talking to you.
And that's even to the extent
And
that
we
if
say,
you look
I
at
have to
what
take
most
this,
of the
and
declaration
that's become
it's actually a
accepted, right?
petition
Okay, you have to take
concerning
it
the
and you walk away,
misdeeds
whether or not you
of
continue
other
that
authorities
face-to-face communication.
and how this has been misunderstood.
Now, it could
and
be
the
that you're
king
really
will
good and you say, no,
hopefully,
I'm shutting off my phone, I'm
we
not
had
listening to
hoped
my
he
phone
would
buzzes, I'll
rectify the
ignore it, I'm
situation.
talking to you,
So
you're right
I think
in front
that
of me,
what you
I'll
have at the
take it.
revolution is not only a
And
disagreement
I would suggest
about
that's the
how
right
should
way
we
to go
relate
about
to the
it.
government
I
of
would
George
suggest
III,
that that's what I try
but
to
also,
always do.
Were
leave my
the
phone in my
colonies,
office
when they were
during
founded,
church, so
were they
whoever's
supposed to
talking
be
me, I can sit
governed
and
in this
talk
way
with
that they
them.
would be
We
subject
talk
to
face
direct
to face.
taxation?
And I think we do need to
So
prioritize.
that's, for instance, why
certainly
when
to have
Adams talks about the
face-to-face
doctrine
and
of lesser
communal
magistrates, he
worship,
says,
certainly.
yes, I can't
But as a
decide actually
pastor,
what's
I
going to
ask
happen
to
in
deal with the
Parliament,
people
but
who are frightened
I do have
silly
the
to
responsibility
come
in
out in public
Massachusetts that the
and
people are
frightened
not
silly
oppressed
to
by
come to
unjust
church,
taxation.
although they
So,
still want to
yeah, I
hear the
think the
gospel of
revolution was
Jesus Christ.
justified.
And so I am willing out of love to serve them as
My
their
question
minister.
is not for anyone
of the
specifically on the panel, but for
And I
the
hope
entire
that over
assembly.
time, as we
Is
get
anyone
through this,
old enough to
they
know
will
if
come
this
back,
discussion occurred
and we might even have more
when
people
Walter A.
who
Meyer
have been
began
reached
speaking on the Lutheran Hour
by
Radio?
our streaming services, who will then come
Was it
and
an
meet us
issue
for the
then
first time
about using the
So I'm doing
technology,
both
and is it
things.
acceptable?
At the same time. But yes, I'd like to prioritize, but I can't leave behind the people
I don't.
who
I'm
just out
not
of
old
fear
enough, but
can't bring themselves to watch.
but I have
our
read
doors.
about it. Yeah, it was.
Don't sit down.
It was. He was a lot
Don't
more
sit down.
controversial than people remember. I mean, they actually discussed at a Synod convention whether or
I
not he should
understand the
continue to be
courtesy
allowed
of
to
the
live in
cell
his
phone thing.
parsonage
That's
on the
great.
Concordia Seminary campus
I understand.
because he wasn't
electronic
teaching
communications
enough
at the end of
class.
the day and the
So, and that
possibilities
was
we
sort of
have
a
is
proxy
that's
for
fantastic.
discomfort about,
And to
and
utilize them.
that also aligned. I mean, WAM1
Absolutely.
was aligned with the people that brought John Benck into power.
Follow
So
up a little bit on what
there were
Pastor
political
Getzman
things that have
said.
kind of evaporated by now,
Is that
but there was
very
controversy about
extreme
preaching over the radio and what that would
importance
do
of physical
to
gathering together.
the church.
Is
And you
there
can
that
tell the anxiety was
possibility?
still there because even when
I've
when
seen
Dale Meyer
indicated
became
in
Lutheran Hour
conversation.
speaker, he added Christ to the
And I
nations
wonder
and
if
the
it
nations
falls
to the
into
church, because there was always this sort of
possibility
discomfort that maybe they would just listen on the radio.
that
And that was definitely
can
something
remain
that
at
came up
home,
in his time.
check the box,
This is
and now I
in
have got
Paul
my
Meyer's
anonymity,
biography. He talks about
and
these
therefore
things. So.
absolve myself of any responsibility.
Any further
that there?
questions?
Right. So you're saying, I'm sorry, I was having a hard time hearing everything you were saying.
So
But
I
you're saying
had,
ultimately we
one
don't
I
have a
can
check
stand
and
up again,
balance if
Pastor
people are
Stone,
communicating.
because I
Okay.
said you raised my hackles.
An interesting thing.
And I'm going to preface this by
I thought
saying
of-
in the
well, at
present
least it was to
company of
me,
the
so
four
I'll
of
share
us
it with
on
you.
here, I don't want to
And you
begin
can
like
judge
one of our
yourselves.
previous synod presidents would often
Why doesn't
begin
Paul
and say,
go to
I'm not a
every
theologian.
congregation and deliver his
but I'm
messages personally?
I'm not a theologian of your
Why does he
caliber,
write
but I play
letters
one
to
here
them
on Sundays
and have those
a few
letters
days
sent
during
and then
the
have
week.
those letters read?
One of the
And
things
Paul
I've
even
been
talks
concerned
about,
pastorally,
which one of the letters is it where he talks about, I'm
which
with
didn't
you
come up in any of yours, is,
spiritually,
and then
even though,
and I'll
right
try to
now,
explain it.
even though I'm
is
not with you
adiaphora.
physically.
And
The whole
I have
idea
looked
of Scripture
on the Mass
itself,
in a way as
of the Word of God going out
adiaphora,
apart from the
because
speaker.
I certainly have members,
The Gospels,
even
the
who have
epistles,
spoken to me, and I'm a
we never met those
non-master.
speakers. We never
who
encountered
have,
them face to face.
accused
And yet
me of
on a
not
Sunday
being
morning, we
Christian and not
read
being
the words
hearing.
from them.
And I have taken the
Now,
approach
that
as a
should help
pastor that I'm not going to
inform
put any
us as
obstacle
to
in the way
using
of my people
electronic
coming into
communication.
this building.
Is it the best
now, we
thing?
do have
Should
a
we have
mass
people
service,
coming to our
and
churches
you are required at that
and taking
time,
part?
but then we
Yes.
also have a
Should we
service
encourage them to do
that's
that?
not.
Yes.
And
Should
so
it
maybe
be
my
prioritized?
question
Yes.
is,
But is using electronic
is
media,
there-
especially at this time,
we call
something
it virtue
that that we should
signaling
run away
now, I
from?
guess, but,
No. Do we have to learn how to
since
use
there are
it? Yes. Do
people
we
who
have to
believe that
figure out
if you
checks
do
and
not wear a
balances?
mask,
Yes.
you do
Like
not
everything
care about
else.
other people. And I know people who are not wearing a
But we
mask
have to
because
see
of
that the Word of
conscience,
God can
because
work
of things they
through it
don't
and
want
does
to teach
work
their
through it.
children. And
to reach
and
people
I
who
would even
otherwise
say
wouldn't hear it.
probably some believe it's a
And then we
form of
encourage them to
government
take part,
protest.
come and take part in the actual communal
audio
aspect
opera
of the church.
be applied, or is it something that could enter into Pastor Strawn sit down for a moment? So I'll give this to either of the other doctors, but someone mentioned
I've got one member of my congregation
divided
here
we
today,
are
and I'd respectfully
now
ask her to leave
because of
before
what
I
we're
answer the
facing,
question.
more so than I think ever before. Like, in a confessional Lutheran
Boy,
church,
it
we have
really
one
is a
kind of
compelling
service.
question.
For many of us, we only have one service,
Because
and now
and it's a deep
I would say,
question.
like,
It
I
isn't
have 5
It
congregations.
isn't just
I
a
have
surface
my
level question,
masked
because we as a
congregation
culture
at
have
8
agreed.
that doesn't sing.
The one thing
I
we
have my
agree on
9
as a culture
o'clock
to a certain
non-maskers
extent
who sing.
is that
We have
everybody
it
can kind of do
broadcast
their
into
own
the
thing.
parking lot. We have people who come
the
into
Western
the parking
culture
lot
has
and just
done that.
listen on FM. We
And
stream,
ultimately,
and then
we've
I have a small
privatized
Monday night
Christianity.
where people can
And that's
spread
fine
out.
too, okay? And
What's our
this is kind
hope
of a private
for,
setting, actually, when it comes right
we've
down
never
to it. We're not
faced
forcing
this.
this on the city of St. Cloud or the
Do we
state of
have a
Minnesota
hope,
or whatever. We've all
short of the
voluntarily
resurrection,
agreed to come here. But
for
what happens
unifying
then
again, or
when
what
we
are
start disagreeing
your
about
thoughts
what
on
that private expression
Like,
is?
I think it's one of
that
the
we
things
agree
people
in,
are concerned about, that
that
even
we
when this
express.
is over,
And that's
it's not
exactly
gonna be
what's
over
happened
for
in
a
our
lot of
congregation, and we've had some
that they
trouble
might.
with
So
that.
just
And that is the idea.
pastoral thoughts, scriptural thoughts
We
on
had
that.
somebody visit our congregation a few weeks ago and say, well, I'm not going to wear a mask here, and cause some trouble because it was in our
Before we
mask
had
service.
COVID,
But he was
we
very,
had
very
8
adamant
o'clock
that he not
church
wear one,
and
and
10:30
we weren't going to
church.
kick him out. So is this
It's
a
like serving 2
situation where he
congregations in a way.
is
You've got the 8
expressing his
o'clock people,
political
you got the
points of
10:30
view and his
people,
ideas of
and
freedom
it
and
always
all of
seemed to
that?
me to be
And-
a challenge to try to keep them
Well,
together
here's
as
the
one
deal.
congregation.
When is
Then
our
we got the
expression
idea
of
we
love
should have a
for
Monday night
someone
service
else never
for
a
vacationers,
situation
for
in
people
which
who go up
we
north
give
for the
up things
weekend,
personally
come
to
back, they
express
work
that
on Monday,
love?
then come to church on Monday night.
It's a
And
hard
so now we have
thing
the
to
8
say.
o'clock, 10:30, and the Monday
But
people
at the end of the
keep on
day, that's
fragmenting.
what we are being asked to
And
do.
now how do you
You're
keep
frightened,
them all together?
so I'll put on a mask.
And
No, it's more important for me to make a statement here
it seems to me we have a couple of
than for
built-in
me to do something in love for you.
advantages. And one is the order
That, I
of
think, is what
service.
the issue is, and I don't think it is in that matter.
If we're all
of audio
doing the
opera.
same order
We
of
have to deal
service,
with
even
it,
if we're doing it at
audio
3
opera.
different
we don't
times,
have to. We have to deal with it
that
as
gives
it
us
is.
something that we have in common.
But at the end of the day, when
There was
you
a
serve
time
somebody in love,
when
you're
if you
always
went on vacation
using
and
your
were looking for
term,
a church to visit on a Sunday,
subordinating yourself to them.
you'd look at the hymnal.
And if in that subordination
If
it
it was
means
the
you
same
put on a
hymnal you had at
mask
home,
to
okay,
speak
I'll
with
feel
them,
at
even
home
though you
here.
don't want to, and it's against your very
I realize it's
nature
not quite
to put
like it
that
used to
mask
be,
on.
but I remember those
I
days.
mean, have you ever had a colonoscopy?
And the other thing is, give them the same sermon.
That was humor.
So I preach
I'll
the
try
same
again.
sermon at 8, same sermon at 10:30, same
Have
sermon
you ever
on
had
Monday.
a colonoscopy?
And now they all get the
Try
same
to
sermon.
protest at that
They
situation.
can talk to each other about the sermon.
When you go in, they hand you stuff and they
So we have things
take
like this that
and
we can
this,
do
and then
to
here's the pictures
unify
and go
them.
home and you're fine.
And what we're really using to do
you
that
could
then is
protest
the
all you
gospel.
want, but in order for you to get that
The order of
procedure
service
done,
really
you
is
have
the gospel.
to really subordinate
And
yourself.
I trust that
in order-
most of the time the sermon is the
in
gospel
a very
too.
embarrassing way.
But at least
What's
as a friend of
the
mine
deal?
used to say, that
we
the
put
order
on
of
shirts,
service
we
is
put
there to
on
protect you
pants,
from your
we put on
pastor.
shoes. You
At
remember
least
no
you know you'll
shoes,
get it
no
out of the
shirt,
liturgy,
shirt,
even if
no
you don't have
service?
a good sermon necessarily.
Was that a health
particular
issue
Sunday.
or was it an anti-hippie
But
thing? What was it? Those
think,
of you who
too,
remember, it was
about,
part anti-hippie, part health, right? No
we
shoes,
had
no
a
shirt,
discussion.
no service. I do think it's an issue where
How
we're
do
asking
we design
someone
our website?
to do this. And
what is our
they're being
website
confronted
for?
with it. What does it mean for me to love another person?
And two basic answers
It's,
are
any
either
newlywed
it's
goes
for
through the whole
visitors,
thing.
it's
Goes through
for
the same thing,
outsiders,
right?
so that they can
When
check us out
the
before
guy
they
finally
come.
has to learn to put the seat down.
And so you can have things on there.
That's the way I'm looking
what's
at it for now.
What's
I don't-
expected in the
I-
way
and
of
I-
dress?
Because the fear
And where
of
do
the
you
person
park?
with the mask is
And
real.
what's going to happen when you come in? And how
It
does
is
the
real.
service work? I mean, if they don't know anything,
real fear.
you can give them a little
do I
bit of
love
an
that
introduction.
person, and do I want to
It'll
serve
make
that
it
person
easier
or not, or
to
is it
visit
more
for the first
important for me
time.
to express myself
And if you've
politically?
browsed church websites, you've probably
That's- I
seen a
think
few
those
like
are the
that.
Those are the two realities.
And there's other
there.
church websites that are
And we
for
have
the
the same
people that
issue,
are
and
already
we try to
members.
solve it on a weekly basis.
And now here's where you can
And-
go to
and slowly
look at
over
the
time,
calendar and
people have
find out what
started wearing
time is that
masks.
meeting.
Of course, they rip them off right when they come out the door.
So how
At
you
least for that hour, they got
use the
them on.
website depends
So I
on
think
who you're
this
talking
person
to,
is-
who you're aiming at. who you're trying to reach.
Thank you. I don't know that I
And
have so
I'm
much a
not here
question as just
to
want to express my
advocate for
concerns
one over the other. I'm just saying we can
as
be
a
intentional about
60-year-old
these kind of things.
layperson.
And these are really
sees the
conversations we were
generational
already
differences.
having
We talked about
before March.
whether you interrupt your conversation because
And in a
someone
way,
gets
it hasn't
text.
changed.
I'm a physician in a
We
hospital.
still
so
have
as
people meeting at
patients wait
different
24
times.
hours to
We have
see me
people
again. I
meeting
can
with
come in and pull up a
different,
chair to sit down and talk to them about what's going on
should we
with
say
their
preferences?
issues. And then
Whether
they get a
it's
phone call.
musical
They'll put
styles
me on
or
hold
whether
for
it's time
5
of
minutes.
day.
And it's amazing
And
to
that's
me
the question.
because
You
I
have a
wouldn't
Monday
do
night
that if it
service.
was
Is
just
that
a casual
because they like the
conversation
music
with
there
somebody,
better, or
let
is
alone
that
if
because
the
they like
doctor
that
is
time
showing up.
better?
But that's the way
Don't know
people have
necessarily.
become.
So
And I see it in
I
the
do
church
think
too.
we have these
talk
two
about how comfortable the younger people are with
tools, or
the
these
electronic
two
means of transmission, those kind of
advantages
things.
that we can
I had a
maybe more
member from our
consciously try to
congregation here
use. We
sitting in
use
the
the
pew
same
here
order of
earlier.
service.
He's no longer here,
We
but
give
I
them
hadn't
the
seen
same
him for
sermon
months.
and try
And I
to unify
appreciated seeing
people
him
by means of the
because
word.
I have over
Thank
the
you.
last 30 years enjoyed his presence when we worked together on committees,
Pastor Grine.
when we've been in
So
Bible
my question
studies
is for
together,
Dr. Coons,
whether it's group Bible
and
studies,
thank you
small
for the
group
words
like
of
men's
hope that
Bible
you
studies.
expressed at the
There's a
conclusion of your
fellowship
presentation,
that goes
the assurance
beyond
that we have
the actual church service that
in
I
regard to being
have
subordinate
appreciated over
to
my
our
years in the
government.
church.
There was
And I
another
think if you're
time in our nation's history
basically
when our
getting all
nation
of
was
your
awfully
church
divided,
from your
and
smartphone,
that was at the time
you
of the
miss out on that
Revolutionary
entire
War,
fellowship
where
aspect.
there were a
And
number of people,
I don't know how to nurture
number of
it
citizens who thought we should be
in our younger
subordinate
members. If they're
to
comfortable
King
being somewhere
George,
else,
and there
getting
were
a
those who
message,
thought that
how
we
do you
should
cultivate those
rebel
interconnections
and revolt.
between yourself and other
So in
members
your
of the
opinion,
congregation
were
that can
those
form
who
strong
thought
bonds
that a revolt
throughout
was
your
necessary
life in the church right up to the
justified
time of their
in
burial?
not being
And I don't know how to
supported,
approach that.
subordinate to King George?
Yeah, I do think they were justified because their argument is that the Constitution of
I don't have any
government
problem
is
with
not
that.
actually.
I mean,
and I think this is
I think
this is pretty
we
important.
we
and
struggled
it's an
in
issue
our
that,
congregation with the
Lutherans have
phones
always
going
had
off during
in
the
America,
service. And
some
not
of
only
it
would they
is
go off,
justified
and we all
that
did,
we
right?
have trouble
Phones would go off
understanding
during
how
the
to
service.
operate
And we had
within
one
this
person, not
governmental
only would the
system
phone go
because
off,
whereas
it
Lutherans
was
come
always
from
during the
fairly
service.
strictly monarchical
Sometimes she'd
situations
pick
in
it up
Europe,
and start talking to the person
Anglo-Saxon
as she
government
walked out of the
has
church.
never been
And I think we all learned
straightforwardly an issue of the guy at the top issues commands.
what the proper
And that's even
etiquette
to the extent
for
that if you
the
look
usage
at
of phone
what
in a
most of
group
the
setting
declaration
was, and
is,
then
it's actually a
put the phone away
petition
during church, put the phone away
concerning
after
the
church, put the phone
misdeeds of
away during
other
meetings and that sort of thing,
authorities,
so you can interact with people
and how
in the
this has
meeting.
been misunderstood,
And,
and the king will hopefully,
if you want to
we had
interact with
hoped he
people.
would rectify
And
this
if you
situation.
don't want to interact with people,
So I
take out
think
the phone.
that what you have at the revolution
And that
is
tells
not only a
everybody,
disagreement
don't
about
talk to me.
how should we
I'm
relate to
busy
the government of
with
George
somebody
III,
else. I mean, we're learning.
but also
We're learning how to do it.
were
Do we
the
want to have that
colonies when they were
face-to-face
founded,
communication? Yeah.
were they
But
supposed
let's be
to
honest.
be
Are we
governed in
better
this
at
way that they would be
communicating with some
subject to
people
direct
on our phone?
taxation? So
Call your
that's,
kids
for
and
instance,
see
why
if they
when Adams
answer.
talks about
They
the
won't.
doctrine of lesser
Send them a
magistrates, he
text.
says,
You'll get a
yes, I
text
can't
right back.
decide actually what's going to happen in Parliament, but
What are they saying?
I do have the
They're
responsibility
saying,
in Massachusetts
I don't have time
that
to
the people are
talk
not
to you,
oppressed by unjust taxation.
but if you just
So,
need a yes
yeah,
or
I
a
think the
no,
revolution
or
was
yeah, I'll be
justified.
there at 5,
Thank you.
Yep.
you'll get that from me. We need to take a
My
step
question
back and
is
look
not
at these
for anyone
means of
specifically on the
communication, and
panel,
instead
but
of
for the
saying
entire assembly.
only this,
Is anyone old enough to
some
know
sort
if
of,
this
what would you
discussion
call that,
occurred
Luddite,
when
Luddite
Walter A.
fashion,
Meyer began speaking
and say,
on
no, let's
Lutheran
learn
Hour
how to
Radio?
use them. Let's learn how to use them in a good way, a polite way, an effective
Was it
way,
an issue then
and therefore
about
communicate
using
with
the
people.
technology, and
Most
is
of
it
my
acceptable?
communication I receive as a pastor is not face to face. It's not as a phone call.
I'm
It's
not
actually
old
through
enough, but
texting.
I
And I get
But I have
text. I
read
got a
about
text
it.
yesterday with a poem from a member
yeah,
who's
it was
80 years old.
It was.
And he sent me a poem
He was a lot more
that
controversial
he found in a
than people
book, which he took a
remember.
picture.
I mean,
And he said, Pastor, I saw
they
this
actually
poem
discussed
today
at
and I
a Senate
thought of
convention
you.
whether or not he should
So
continue
good
to
morning.
be allowed to live in
From
his
one of your students, he's
parsonage on
80
the
years
Concordia
old.
Seminary
He
campus.
took the picture, he sent
He
it to
wasn't
me, sent me a
teaching
text.
enough class.
Awesome.
So, and that
I
was
said,
sort of a proxy
I don't even
for
want to read this. Please
discomfort
come into my
about-
office and talk to me later.
And that also aligned. I mean, WHAM1 was aligned aligned with the people.
I
that
find
brought
it
John
incredibly
Hinckley to
efficient
power. So
myself. I love it when they
there
do
were
that.
political
Because
things
then
that
we
have
can
kind
talk,
of
we can
evaporated by
communicate.
now,
Hey, I
but
love you.
there
I
was
love you too.
controversy about preaching
I'm
over the
thinking of
radio
you.
and
I'm
what that
thinking
would
of you
do
too, but I'm not
to
going to take up 2
the
hours of your
church.
time.
You know, and you
drive
can
all
tell
the
the
way up to
anxiety was
church
still
and do
there
all of
because
this.
even when
It's
Dale
extremely
Meyer
efficient,
became
but we
Lutheran
have
hour
to know
speaker,
when
he
to do
added
it, when to use it,
Christ to the
when not
nations
to use
and
it,
the
how to
nations
use
to
it,
the
all of those
church.
different things. Yeah,
Because there was
it's
always this
complex. I
sort
get
of
it.
discomfort that maybe they would just listen on the radio. And that was definitely something that came up in his
just a
time.
question, since our
This is
topic is the
in
gospel
Paul
in a
Meyer's
pandemic.
biography. He talks about these things.
I see in my colleagues quite extensive.
Any further
almost
questions?
burnout right now, because we're so busy doing all these
I
other
had
things.
one. I can stand up again,
Make
Pastor
everybody
Strong,
happy, or to get the
because I said you
gospel
raised
out,
my
or
hackles.
whatever. And you have
And
people
I'm going to
that,
preface this by saying, in the present company of the four of
matter
us
which
on
way,
here, I don't want to
whether wear a
begin like one of
mask
our
or
previous
not wear a
synod
mask,
presidents
that's not
would
really
often
the
begin and
question, whether you
say,
have
I'm not a theologian,
jiggers for Jesus.
but I'm not a theologian of your caliber, but I
You
play
know,
one here on Sundays and a few days during
this has
the
caused
week.
a lot of clergy to
One
break
of the
down.
things I've been concerned
And
about
you
pastorally,
see that too, as
which didn't come up in any of yours, is, and then this,
you see
and
that,
I'll try to explain
I
it,
think this is going to be a
is
problem for our
adiaphora.
churches here. Very short.
And I have looked on the
This
mask
continues.
in a way
Hey,
as
thoughts on that?
adiaphora, because I certainly have members, even who have spoken
I see
to
that,
me, and I'm
pretty
a
universally.
non-masker,
And I think it
who
exacerbates
have,
something which is already a great
accused me
difficulty,
of not
which
being
is
Christian and not
conceiving
being
of the pastoral
caring.
office as
And I have
something where
taken the approach as
potentially
a pastor that
you
I'm not
can
going to
make
put any
everyone happy,
obstacle in the way of my
and
people
the
coming
church will
into
be at
this
peace.
building.
And
Now, we do have a mass
and so
service,
this has
and you are required at that
exacerbated
time,
that
but then we also
problem
have a
and
service
increased the
that's
tension
not. And
between
so maybe my
that sort of
question
delusion and what your daily life
is
is
there,
like.
we call it virtue
So
signaling
everything
now,
that
I
is
guess, but
stressful and unrewarding,
since there are
is
people who
magnified
believe that if
however
you
many
do not
times,
wear a
depending on
mask, you do
your
not care
parish
about
and
other
its
people.
political situation and
And
everything.
I know
And
people
then
who are not wearing
stuff
a
that is
mask
most
because
rewarding,
of
such
conscience,
as
because of
being there when
things
somebody
they don't
dies,
want to teach their
is
children.
in many cases taken away.
And I would even
So,
say probably
there's no
some
way that
believe
it
it's
doesn't
a
do
form of
damage to the
government
clergy.
protest.
And then
Can adiaphora
that sort of
be
loneliness,
applied,
which is
or is that
sometimes
is
endemic
it something
to the
that
office,
could enter into
also gets enhanced
adiaphora?
because you're somebody who in this situation is in a decision-making position, and those people are in any realm of life
I've got
usually
one member of my
not as popular
congregation here
as
today,
people
and
who
I'd
don't have to make
respectfully ask her to
decisions,
leave before I
and
answer
you're
the
making
question.
decisions on which people already know what the right answer is before you have even thought about it.
Boy, it really
I
is a
don't think that
compelling
there's
question.
love of the brotherhood, I think, has to extend also between
Because,
the clergy, because
and it's a deep
people's
question.
differing
It isn't
decisions
just
have
it
to be
isn't just a surface level
you
question.
need to just be happy the
because
guy's
we
still
as a
doing
culture
his job
have agreed.
and hasn't fled
The one
from
thing
those
we agree
things,
on as a culture to a certain
because
extent
the chances that
is
he
that
could
everybody
leave it
can
have
kind of do
probably
their own
increased
thing.
in his own mind.
I mean, the
recently.
Western culture has done that, and
Yeah,
ultimately we've privatized
I was thinking
Christianity,
about that, especially as you
and
said,
that's
Pastor
fine too.
Strong, loving
Okay.
loving
And
our
this is kind of a
neighbors
private
in
setting,
fear.
actually, when it comes right down to
One
it. We're
thing I
not
know,
forcing
as a
this on
father,
the
that
city of
sometimes
St.
the
Cloud or
loving
the state of
being,
Minnesota or whatever. We've all
loving
voluntarily
being
agreed to
seems
come here.
profoundly unloving
But what
to children.
happens then when we start disagreeing about what that private expression is that we agree in,
And I think
that we
part
express?
of the nature or the
And
complex
that's
nature of
exactly what's
sacrificial
happened in our
love. So I wonder
congregation,
if you
and
could
we've
talk
had
about that. What does
some
that
trouble
look
with
like?
that, and that is the
Sometimes,
idea
of course, it does require putting aside our
we had somebody
comforts,
visit our
right?
congregation a few
Sometimes it
weeks
also
ago
requires
and
putting
say, well, I'm
aside
not going to
our,
wear a mask here,
accommodation
and cause some trouble because
Yeah,
it was in
and
our mask service. But he was very, very
Things to All
adamant that he
Men
not wear
was,
one, and we weren't going to kick
probably
him out.
continues to be
So is
misused
this a
to apply to
situation
worship
where
style.
he is
But
expressing
what
his
Paul
political
means
points
when
of
he's
view and
talking
his
about
ideas of
those
freedom
different
and all of
changes that he's
that?
undergoing for different
And-
groups in 1 Corinthians 9
Well,
is that
here's the
he's not
deal.
asking them to fundamentally change
When is our expression
everything
of
about
love for
themselves
someone else
before he will serve
never
them with the gospel.
a situation in which
The
we
problem
give
is
up
that
things
what we are
personally
unaccustomed
to
to are
express
the
that
levels
love?
of
It's a
division
hard
on basic
thing to
questions
say.
such as how
But at
much
the
stuff
end of
do
the
I
day,
need to go out in
that's
public
what
and appear
we
with
are
other
being
people.
asked to do. You're frightened.
So it's not really
I'll put
controversial
on a
that you need to
mask.
wear a shirt to church.
No, it's more
It is
important for me
controversial
to
that
make
you need
a
to wear a
statement
mask. We're kind
here
of unaccustomed to that
than
level
for
of division
me
in
to
daily
do
life.
something in love for
Some
you.
societies deal with it all the time. Paul deals with it when
That
he
I
runs
think is what
between
the
Jews
issue
and
is,
Gentiles,
and I don't think it is in
and
that matter
therefore
of
governs his
adiaphora.
conduct
Well,
accordingly.
we have to
He
deal
doesn't
with it.
ask Jews to
adiaphora.
become
We don't have to
comfortable
we
with
have to deal with it
Gentiles
as it is.
first. He goes
But
to
at
them
the
and he
end of the
doesn't ask
day,
Gentiles to go
when
find a
you
bunch of
serve
Jews to
somebody
hang
in
out
love,
with. He
you're
goes to the
always,
Gentiles, lives
using
as
your
those
term,
to those outside the law. He
subordinating
becomes as one
yourself
outside
to
the
them.
law, not being
And if
outside
in
the
that
law, but in the law
subordination
of
it means you
Christ.
put
And the law
on
of
a
Christ
mask
is that
to
I'm not
speak
going
with
to
them,
ask you
even
to
though you don't
fundamentally
want to,
change
and it's
everything
against your
about
very
yourself. So I
nature to
don't
put
need you
that
to
mask
agree
on.
on what
I mean,
media
have you
you
ever
should be
had
paying
a
attention to. Or,
colonoscopy?
here, watch this video I saw where they made fun of masks in late February on
humor.
MSNBC.
I'll try it again.
I could show you that video, but
Have you
I
ever
don't
had a
need you to do
colonoscopy?
that first
Try to
Yes.
protest
before I will
at that
serve you with the gospel.
situation.
So I mean,
When
I
you
think
go
the
in, they
provision
hand you
of
stuff
multiple
and they
services,
do,
like you were
you
talking
take
about,
this
Bruce,
and do this, and then, here's
appears
the pictures and
relatively
go home
common.
and you're fine.
that I'm seeing
You know,
where it's
you could protest
an
all
issue
you
of any
want,
kind
but in
the
order for
parish.
you to get that procedure done,
And I think
you have
that's
to
probably
really,
the best solution.
really,
You're not going to
really
change people's
subordinate yourself
political
in
media
order-
beliefs about viruses and
in a
stuff
very
overnight,
embarrassing
and
way.
You don't need to for them to.
What's
come to
the
church.
deal?
Yeah.
We put on shirts, we put on pants, we put on shoes. Remember, no shoes,
Albert,
no
thank you
shirt,
for,
no
your
service.
discussion on Job, one of my
Was that a
my
health
favorite
issue or
books,
was it an anti-hippie?
honestly,
thing?
because I think it shows
What
us
was
a little
it?
bit of, at
Those
least
of
to
you
me,
who
that
remember,
God
it
has
was
a
part
sense of humor
anti-hippie, part health,
when He's
right?
talking about
No shoes, no shirt,
where were
shirt,
you
no
when
service.
I laid the foundations. I mean,
I
those
do think it's an
rhetorical
issue where we're
questions.
asking someone
and I think
to do
I
this.
love reading that. It
And
reminds me what
they're
my
being
place
confronted
is
with it. What does it mean
in
for
life.
me
But
to love
I wondered
another
if you could
person?
talk a little bit about the difference between
It's,
as
any
you talked
newlywed
about
goes through the whole
risk
thing,
and
goes through
danger.
the same thing.
And it seems
right?
to me that that's
When
what's caused
the
the
guy
problem
finally
during our
has to learn to
pandemic
put the
is
seat
that
down.
people have lost that difference.
That's the way I'm
between
looking
risk
at
and
it for
danger.
now. I don't,
And our society
because
has
the
created
fear
this
of the person with the
perception
mask
that we're
is
going to
real.
live forever, or that we should.
It is real.
And so that we should eliminate all risk.
It's a real fear.
That's out there.
And do I love that person and do I want to serve that person or not? Or is it more
Yeah, well,
important
thank
for me
you.
to express
I
myself
would
politically?
steal a page out of
I
Adam's
think
book
those are
and
the
say
those are the two
this was already
realities here.
going on
And
before
we have the same
COVID.
issue and we try to solve it.
I've
on a
read
weekly
things that
basis.
say
And-
we're in
and
the
slowly over
process
time,
of
people have
raising
started
the
wearing
most
masks.
risk-averse
Of course, they rip
young
them off
generation
when they come out the door, but at least for that hour.
And
they
you
got
hear
them
about
on.
helicopter parents
So I think this
and things
person
like that.
was-
What is that? It's all about trying
thank
to
you.
limit, if
I
not
don't know that I have so much a
completely
question as just
eliminate
want to
risk
express my
for your
concerns
children. And now what do
as
they
a
grow up
60-year-old
assuming
lay
and
person
expecting?
who sees
This was
the
all going on
generational
before the
differences.
virus came
And we
along.
talked about
And the
why
virus
you
has just
interrupt the
exacerbated
conversation
that,
because
and in
someone
some
gets a text.
places
I'm a physician in a
intensified
hospital,
it
so
and multiplied
his
it.
patients wait
But
24 hours to see
we
me
don't
again. I can
think in
come in and pull up
terms
a
of
chair
a
to sit
difference
down and talk to
between
them about
danger
what's
and
going
risk
on with
very
their
often anymore.
issues.
I don't think
And if they
explicitly.
get a phone call,
And
they'll
I just
put me on
found that
hold
to be a
for
helpful
5 minutes.
distinction.
And it's amazing to
That's
me
not to
because I
say
wouldn't do that if it
well,
was
if it's
just a
just
casual
risk and
conversation
it's
with
not
somebody,
danger,
let
then you
alone if your
don't
doctor
worry
is
about it
showing
at
up.
all.
But that's the way
And
people
I
have
tried to
become.
say that in my paper
And
too.
I see it in the church
If you're
too.
in a higher
We
risk
talk about,
category,
how
you
comfortable
have
the
to
younger
take that
people
into
are with the
consideration.
electronic means of
And if
transmission,
you're
those kind of things.
taking care of grandma or
I-
taking care of your
I had
grandfather,
a member
of
from
course
our
that makes a
congregation here
difference.
sitting in the pew here earlier. He's no
But,
longer here, but
uh,
I hadn't seen him for months.
You live your
And I
life
appreciated seeing him because
with a certain amount of risk.
I have over the last 30
That's
years
just the way life is.
enjoyed his presence when we
And
worked together on
people get sick.
committees, when we've been in Bible
And people
studies
die.
together, whether it's
And this
group
didn't
Bible
just
studies,
start in
small group
March.
like men's Bible studies. There's a
And
fellowship
so
that
how
goes
different
beyond
people
the
evaluate
actual
risk
church
and how they
service
respond
that
to
I
it has always been
have
different.
appreciated over my years in the church. And I
Um,
think if you're
We
basically
used
getting
to
all
call
of your
some
church
people
from your
daredevils.
smartphone, you miss out on that
What did that
entire
mean?
fellowship aspect. And I
The
don't know how
risk
to nurture it
didn't enter
in our younger
into how they
members. If they're
decided how
comfortable
to
being
behave.
somewhere else,
And there
getting
were
a
other people who
message,
didn't
how
approve
do
of that and said
cultivate
you
those
should be more
interconnections
cautious,
between
you should be
yourself and
more
other members of the congregation
protective.
that can
I mean,
form
there's
strong
always going to
bonds
be that difference
throughout
in
your
how we
life in the
respond
church
to
right up to the
risk.
time of their burial.
And
I don't know how to
risk
approach
should
that.
be considered, but risk isn't quite the same thing as danger. When there's danger, you know it's there. It's
I don't.
clear.
Again, I
it's
don't have any
certain.
problem with that.
And keep your distance.
I think
Sure.
we struggled in our
Risk, that's a
congregation
little
with the
different.
phones going off during the service.
And now here,
And
again,
not only would
I
they
think
go off,
the
and we
things
all
that have
did,
been
right?
said
Phones
about
would go off during the
let's
service.
love each other,
And we had one person, not
even
only
if
would
we
the phone
don't
go off,
always evaluate
it was
risk in the
always
same way.
during the sermon. Sometimes she'd pick it up and start
this
talking to
is
the person
tearing
as she
families
walked
apart.
out of the church.
This is tearing congregations
And I think
apart.
we all learned
This is tearing our country apart.
what the proper etiquette
And I think
for the usage
one
of phone
thing
in
that
a
could
group
help
setting
would be
was,
just
and
to
then
return
put the
to
phone
that
away during
distinction.
church, put the phone away after
Danger,
church, put
risk.
the phone during
Okay, what's
away
the
during
difference?
meetings
And now what
that
are we
sort of
really
thing, so you
talking
can
about
interact
here?
with people in the meeting.
And how
um,
much risk there is
If you
that
want to interact
changes
with
as we
people.
learn more things.
And if you don't want to
from our
interact with people,
experience.
take out the phone.
I mean, how much risk
And
was
that
there in
tells
March? How
everybody,
much risk
"Don't
is
talk to
there
me.
now?
I'm
For
busy
some people,
with
it's
somebody
more.
else."
For
I
some
mean,
people,
we're
it's
learning.
less.
We're learning how to do it. Do we want to have that face-to-face communication? Yeah. But let's be honest. Are we better at communicating with some people on our phone? Call your kids and see if they answer. They won't. Send them a text. You'll get a text right back. What are they saying? They're saying, "I don't have time to talk to you. But if you just need a yes or a no, or yeah, I'll be there at 5, you'll get that from me.
Yep.
We need to take a step back and look at these means of communication, and instead of saying only this,
Sure.
in some sort of,
I mean,
what would you call that? Luddite,
before this all
a
started,
Luddite fashion.
For years,
Say, no,
I
let's learn
visited
how to
people in
use them.
nursing
Let's learn how
homes.
to use them in a good way, a polite way, an effective
And
way, and therefore
I
communicate with
imagine
people.
this doesn't sound
Most of my
right in the current
communication I
context,
receive
but
as a
there was a
pastor is not
time
face to face.
when
It's
in
not as a
nursing
phone
homes, people
call.
referred to
It's actually through
pneumonia
texting.
as your friend.
And I get text. I got a text yesterday with a poem from
You've
a
been in
member
this
who's 80
nursing
years
home
old
so long, you're so lonely,
And he
and
sent
you
me a
just want to go
poem
home to heaven.
that he found in a book,
And
which
now
he took a
pneumonia
picture.
comes
And he
along,
said,
and it's
Pastor,
your
I
friend,
saw this
and it
poem
helps you
today,
go
and
where
I
you wanna
thought
go.
of you. So good morning from one of your students. He's
And now,
80 years old.
where are the most
He took
vulnerable
picture, he
people
sent it to me,
with
he sent me a
COVID?
text. Awesome.
In the nursing
And I
homes, and
said,
if you have visited in
I don't
nursing
even want to
homes
read
and you
this.
know
Please
what
come
it's
into my
like to
office
live in
and
a
talk to me
nursing
later.
home, granted, they've gotten a lot better. I have to say
I
that.
find it incredibly efficient myself.
There
I
are a
love
lot
it
more
when they do that.
activities,
Because
there are a
then we
lot
can
more
talk, we can
things that go on in
communicate.
nursing
Hey, I
homes
love
now
you,
than there
I love
used
you
to be.
too.
But
I'm
still,
thinking of
do you
you,
know
I'm thinking of you
anybody
too, but
who
I'm not going to take
aspires
up
to
2
end up
hours
in a
of their
nursing
time
home?
and drive all the way up to church and do all of this. It's extremely
And once
efficient.
you're there,
but we have to know when to do it.
if you're lucky,
when to
you
use
get
it,
some
when not to
visitors.
use it, how to use it, all of those
But a
different
lot of
things.
people
Yeah,
don't.
it's complex. I get it.
That's reality.
Blake?
So your perspective on how this works is quite different if you're living in that situation, if you're working in that situation, or if you're not.
Extensive,
I dare say that most people in our country today are blissfully unaware of what life in a nursing home is really like.
Things to make everybody happy or to get the gospel
So,
out or whatever. And you have people that, no matter which way.
I think one of the
whether they wear a
hardest things
mask
for
or
me
not
in the
wear a
last
mask,
months of
that's
my
not really
ministry
the
was
question,
not
whether
being
they have
able to go and visit these people.
little jiggers for Jesus
I mean, if they would have let me in, I would have done it in a heartbeat. And not that I wasn't
this
worried
has caused a lot
or
of
didn't
clergy to break down.
think about the risk.
And you
But,
see that too as
It's just
you know,
something
fellow
that I
brothers,
think is so important to do.
Do you see that? And I think this is going to be a
And
problem for our church.
when that decision is taken out of my hands, it's a very helpless feeling.
Any thoughts on that?
Pastor Getz.
A prelude to my
Yeah, I see that
comment is another
pretty
comment.
universally.
They
And I
let
think it
me in
exacerbates
the
something
nursing
which is
home.
already a great difficulty, which is
I'm a
conceiving of the pastoral
constitutionalist,
office as
and it bothers
something
me
where
when I
potentially
hear the government
you
will
can
now
make
let
everyone
you
happy,
have 50%
and the church will be
capacity
at
in your
peace,
church.
and
I thought it was a
so
God-given
this
right,
has
not a
exacerbated that
government
problem
letting me
and increased
have
the
50%.
tension between
Okay.
that sort of
I
delusion.
want to know about authority.
and
You
what your
talked about
daily
the
life is
authority
like.
of government. The authority
So
of government.
everything that is
What about the authority
stressful
today
and
of
unrewarding
science?
is
You're talking
magnified
about
however many
mask,
times, depending
no mask, and
on
so
your
forth.
parish and its
I don't
political
know
situation and everything. And then
which scientist?
stuff that
What's
is
the
most
authority of
rewarding,
science
such as
today?
being there when somebody dies, is in many
Anybody.
cases taken away. So there's no way that it doesn't do damage to the clergy. And then,
I think one of
that sort of loneliness, which
the debate
is
about science is also really a debate
sometimes
about
endemic
media
to the office,
and what media
also
sources
gets
I believe,
enhanced because
things like
you're
that.
somebody who, in this
I think
situation,
the difficulty
is in a
there is that,
decision-making position.
we're
And
dealing with a
those
situation
people are,
which is
in
in
any
fact
realm of life, usually
much
not as popular
for almost
as
any
people who
human
don't have to
being
make
actually
decisions
to sort through
and you're making
and to
decisions
adjudicate.
on which people already know what the right
And
answer
simply
is.
because someone has a
Before you have
doctorate
even
in
thought
one
about
thing
it,
doesn't
you know.
mean that he
So,
understands something
I don't
even
think that
adjacent
there's
to that subject, let alone
love of the brotherhood.
some
I think
other
has to
facet
extend also
of the
between
question.
the clergy, because people's
so,
differing decisions have to be.
when you're
just-
talking about authority,
you need to just be
or
happy the guy's still doing his
subordination
job
or anything
and,
like that,
hasn't fled from those things.
there are whole realms of
because
modern life
the chances that he could leave
I
it
understand
have
there's a
probably
sense in which
increased in his own
Pastor
mind
Strawn said,
recently.
a computer is a created thing.
It's a
Yeah,
material
go ahead.
thing,
That love the brotherhood. I was thinking
but it's
about
not a
that,
natural
especially as you
thing.
said, Pastor Strong, loving-
and there are whole realms
loving our neighbors
of our
in
daily
their
life,
fear.
including my media
One thing
consumption,
I know, as a father, that sometimes the loving
that
thing,
are not natural.
doing
Now,
the
they're
loving
supposed
thing
to inform
seems
good
profoundly
decisions about
unloving
things
to my
like
children.
voting or my
and I
personal
think that's,
conduct or
heinous criminal
whether or not I
behavior,
get a flu
and
shot
it's
this
like a
year.
loving thing. And I think that
But
is
it's not
part
like
of the
God
nature
needs
or
the media
complex
to
nature of
exist in the
sacrificial
same
love.
sense that he
So I
sets
wonder if you
up
can
the
talk about
family
that.
or
What
the
does that
church or the
look like
state
Sometimes, of course, it does require
So,
putting aside our comfort.
I think that
right?
something you can
Sometimes it
see
also
is that
requires
that
putting
makes those
aside
areas
our,
much more malleable.
other people's pieces.
Yeah, and they're also incredibly powerful. All things to all biblically, it's probably not that hard to see that the media functions as a part of
to
the
apply a
government,
worship style,
especially in a
but
democracy.
What Paul
That
means when he's talking
what it's
about
really doing
those different
is
changes that he's
it's
undergoing for
influencing
different groups in 1
opinion,
Corinthians
both
9,
public and
is that
official,
he's not asking them to
for the
fundamentally
purposes of
change
voting or government
everything
decision
about
making,
themselves
and really functionally
before he
when
will
we're talking
serve
about
them with the gospel.
science, we're talking about the media.
The problem
when we're
is
talking
that
about the
what we
media,
are
we're talking about
unaccustomed to
something
are
that
the levels
has
of
incredible power, generally more
division
than an elected
on
official.
basic questions such as how much stuff do I need to go out in public and appear with other people? So it's not really controversial
Right, I
that you need
think
to wear a
we've
shirt
reached
to
the end of our
church.
day on
It is
the
controversial
schedule,
that you need
so
to wear a
why don't we
mask. We're
show
kind
our
of
appreciation
unaccustomed
to
to
the
that
speakers
level of
one
division
last
in daily
time.
life. Some societies deal with it all the time. Paul deals with it when he runs between Jews and Gentiles, and therefore governs his conduct accordingly. He doesn't ask Jews to become comfortable with
And on your
Gentiles
way
first.
out,
He
if you
goes
would
to
kind
them
of
and he doesn't
police your
ask Gentiles to
pews
go
and
find a bunch
pick
of
up
Jews to hang
any
out with. He
papers
goes to
or
the Gentiles, lives
agendas.
as those,
And
to those
also,
outside
if
the
I
law.
could
He
ask
becomes as one outside the
people
law,
from the
not being
committee
outside the law,
to
but in the law of
help me
Christ. And
take
the law
down
of
some
Christ is
tables
that
and stuff,
I'm not going to ask
I
you to
would
fundamentally
appreciate that.
change everything about yourself. So I don't need you to agree on what media you should be paying attention to, or here, watch this video I saw where they made fun of masks in late February on MSNBC. I mean, I could show you that video, but I don't need you to do that first before I will serve you with the gospel. So I think the provision of multiple services, like you were talking about, Bruce, appears relatively common that I'm seeing where it's an issue of any kind in a parish. And I think that's probably the best solution. You're not going to change people's political media beliefs about viruses and stuff overnight, and you don't need to for them to come to church.
Pastor Albrecht, thank you for your discussion on Job, one of my favorite books, honestly, and because I think it shows us a little bit of, at least to me, that God has a sense of humor when he's talking about, where were you when I laid the foundations? I mean, those rhetorical questions, and I think I love reading that. It reminds me what my place is in life. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the difference between, as you talked about risk and danger. And it seems to me that that's what's caused a problem during our pandemic, is that people have lost that difference between risk and danger. And our society has created this perception that we're going to live forever, or that we should, and so that we should eliminate all risk, and that's out there.
Yeah, well, thank you. I would steal a page out of Adam's book and say this was already going on before COVID. I've read things that say we're in the process of raising the most risk-averse young generation ever. And you hear about helicopter parents and things like that. What is that? It's all about trying to limit, if not completely eliminate, risk for your children. And now what do they grow up assuming and expecting? This was all going on before the virus came along. And the virus has just exacerbated that, and in some places intensified it and multiplied it. But we don't think in terms of a difference between danger and risk very often anymore. I don't think explicitly. And I just found that to be a helpful distinction. That's not to say that, well, if it's just risk and it's not danger, then you don't worry about it at all. And I tried to say that in my paper too. If you're in a higher risk category, you have to take that into consideration. And if you're taking care of grandma or taking care of your grandfather, of course that makes a difference. But you live your life with a certain amount of risk. That's just the way life is. And people get sick. And people die. I mean, this didn't just start in March. And so how different people evaluate risk and how they respond to it has always been different. We used to call some people daredevils. What did that mean? The risk didn't enter into how they decided how to behave. And then there were other people who didn't approve of that and said you should be more cautious, you should be more protective. I mean, there's always going to be that difference in how we respond to risk. And risk should be considered, but risk isn't quite the same thing as danger. When there's danger, you know it's there, it's clear, it's certain, and keep your distance, sure. Now risk, that's a little different. And now here, again, I think the things that have been said about let's love each other, even if we don't always evaluate risk in the same way. But this is tearing families apart. This is tearing congregations apart. This is tearing our country apart. And I think one thing that could help would be just to return to that distinction. Danger, risk. Okay, what's the difference? And now what are we really talking about here? And how much risk there is, that changes as we learn more things from our experience. I mean, how much risk was there in March? How much risk is there now? For some people it's more, for some people it's less. Yep. Sure. I mean, before this all started, for years I visited people in nursing homes. And I imagine this doesn't sound right in the current context, but there was a time when in nursing homes people referred to pneumonia as your friend. You've been in this nursing home so long, you're so lonely, and you just want to go home to heaven. And now pneumonia comes along, and it's your friend, and it helps you go where you want to go. And now, where are the most vulnerable people with COVID? In the nursing homes. And if you have visited in nursing homes and you know what it's like to live in a nursing home, granted, they've gotten a lot better. I have to say that. There are a lot more activities, there are a lot more things that go on in nursing homes now than there used to be. But still, do you know anybody who aspires to end up in a nursing home? And once you're there, if you're lucky, you get some visitors. But a lot of people don't. That's reality. So your perspective on how this works is quite different if you're living in that situation, if you're working in that situation, or if you're not. I dare say that most people in our country today are blissfully unaware of what life in a nursing home is really like. So, I think one of the hardest things for me in the last months of my ministry was not being able to go and visit these people. I mean, if they would have let me in, I would have done it in a heartbeat. And not that I wasn't worried or didn't think about the risk, but it's just something that I think is so important to do. And when that decision is taken out of my hands, it's a very helpless feeling.
Pastor Getz.
A prelude to my comment is another comment. They let me in the nursing home. I'm a constitutionalist, and it bothers me when I hear the government will now let you have 50% capacity in your church. I thought it was a God-given right, not a government letting me have 50%. Okay. I want to know about authority. You talked about the authority of government, the authority of government. What about the authority today of science? You're talking about mask, no mask, and so forth. I don't know which scientist, what's the authority of science today? Anybody.
Yeah, I think one of the debate about science is also really a debate about media and what media sources I believe and things like that. I think the difficulty there is that we're dealing with a situation which is in fact too much for almost any human being actually to sort through and to adjudicate. And simply because someone has a doctorate in one thing doesn't mean that he understands something even adjacent to that subject, let alone some other facet of the question. So when you're talking about authority or subordination or anything like that, there are whole realms of modern life that I understand there's a sense in which, Pastor Strawn said, a computer is a created thing. It's a material thing, but it's not a natural thing. And there are whole realms of our daily life, including my media consumption, that are not natural. Now, they're supposed to inform good decisions about things like voting or my personal conduct or whether or not I get a flu shot this year. But it's not like God needs the media to exist in the same sense that he sets up the family or the church or the state. So I think that something you can see is that makes those areas much more malleable. They're also incredibly powerful. I think biblically, it's probably not that hard to see that the media functions as a part of the government, especially in a democracy. That what it's really doing is that it's influencing opinion, both public and official, for the purposes of voting or government decision making. And really functionally, when we're talking about science, we're talking about the media. And when we're talking about the media, we're talking about something that has incredible power, generally more than an elected official. So did you want to follow up, sir? You're good. All right.
Right, I think we've reached the end of our day on the schedule, so why don't we show our appreciation to the speakers one last time. And on your way out, if you would kind of police your pews and pick up any papers or agendas. And also, if I could ask the people from the committee to help me take down some tables and stuff, I would appreciate that.
Get too tired in your retirement.
My two boys up with me playing with the games boys. Really? Well,